Hey Raindrops, on today's episode of Reality with the King with Courtney Parker and our special guest Judge Tyranny. So look, we have to talk about what has been dominating the news cycle for the past, I want to say like 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Whether you are a fan of the Today Show or even daytime television or reality TV, this story is dominating every single news cycle known to man. We are here to talk about the disappearance of Today Show's journalist and anchor Savannah Guthrie's mom, Nancy, who is 84 years old, that was missing, well, still is missing as of the night of January 31st, 2026. Investigators immediately shifted this from a missing person call to a criminal investigation because evidence suggests she was taken by her will. So this is like
Against her will.
against her will. I'm
Mhm.
sorry, against her will. What's crazy about this is the fact that Savannah, as you all know, is Today Show anchor. She is in America's household 5 days a week, all year round. She was supposed to be at the Olympics. She
Mhm.
decided not to even go because this horrific situation happened. And the reason why I want us to talk about it is because this could happen, God forbid, obviously, to any one of us. So on January 31st at 9:48 p.m., Nancy is dropped off at her home by her son-in-law. That's the last known sighting. 1:47 in the morning that same day, surveillance footage shows a masked, armed individual tampering with Nancy's doorbell camera, seemingly disabling it. On February 1st, Nancy's pacemaker app on her phone disconnects, which is unusual and concerning given her medical needs. Later that morning, churchgoers report Nancy missing when she doesn't show up for church. Relatives find her home intact, but Nancy is gone and her phone and medication is left behind. There is blood at the scene of the crime, but is later confirmed by DNA to be her blood, a sign of a potential violent encounter. February 2nd, Prima County authorities shift from a missing person search to a suspected abduction case. The FBI gets involved and extensive search efforts begin. A few days later, investigators intensify searches, including the neighborhood, canvassing, and computer forensics. Evidence of forced entry and tampered security footage suggests premeditation. Federal agents release surveillance images of the masked intruder to the public. February 10th and the 11th, today, a person is detained during a traffic stop as a potential person of interest, and a property search in Rio Rico, Arizona is conducted under warrant, but the individual is released and no charges are filed. Throughout the investigation, the FBI offers a $50,000 reward for credible tips. The family continues to make emotional public appeals, including statements interpreted as openness to ransom negotiation if proof of life is provided. So this is the thing. As somebody who watches a lot of movies and a lot of Dateline NBC, one thing that we, at least I've always watched, is you don't negotiate with the ransom. Like it's something that you do get cops involved. Yes, it's tricky because you're playing 50-50 with someone's life, but and again, this is not even a legal question, it's more of an opinion.
Right.
Do y'all think them making this public is going to help or hinder her findings? This is public.
Yeah, this is public and they're making emotional pleas. They're offering to pay ransoms. It just feels like a desperate attempt, which I probably would as well. Like if my mother is elderly and missing, need of medication. She's been gone now for what, 14 days, 12, 13, 14 days. It's the 11th day. She went missing on the 31st. So we're at day 12. She's been gone a little over, I mean, a little just under 2 weeks. Um,
Hmm.
I wanted to ask you, I wanted to pivot just a bit to get into some possible charges. I know when you were reading the timeline, once the FBI got involved, local authorities are involved. We know they moved from missing person to a possible kidnapping. And I'm going to go through just a few things that you said and talk to us a bit, Judge T, about what these potential charges, because I always like to veer on the fact of when they find her versus if they find her. So I'm gonna just put that out there. When they find her, those associated to her kidnapping, abduction, and her being gone, could they be facing charges of? Could you talk to us about potential charges? What we're looking at in terms of the actual crime or crimes.
Yes. So first I would say to Carlos's question, I would say that it is always, especially when we're talking about legal education, it is always very, very smart to get law enforcement involved because when you're dealing with something as serious as this, even though your fears may be driving you, which is understandable, you need professionals. You need people who have experience with dealing with these kinds of situations. I know it's a very scary time, but I think that you always have to, it's no different than when I say always get a lawyer, always consult a lawyer. If someone you believe has any criminal involvement in something related to a missing persons, I would say your first call should be to law enforcement. As far as the charges, it's a laundry list of possible charges. And so, again, my famous disclaimer, I'm not saying anyone is going to be charged. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm just saying that, hey, here is a variety of charges that someone, once the facts unfold.
Right.
And I, I'm constantly reminding the raindrops we have to stay rooted in facts. I
Hmm.
understand that this has become a big media speculation and media drawn, and rightfully so, to be honest with you guys, because I guess I look at things a little bit different. Savannah, the people she worked with are helping her.
Right.
If we went missing from work or my mother went missing, my colleagues would help me as well. We all have different jobs. I believe that if something happened to Carlos, all of his friends who have some kind of social media platform would step up to help find Carlos. So it's not, to me, I get it. Like it feels like that this is getting more attention than needed. But to me, it just looks like her colleagues are really stepping up and supporting her at a very difficult time because she is a national spokeswoman. With
Yeah.
the charges,
To
of
run
course,
through you.
the most obvious is kidnapping,
Got it.
right? And kidnapping, I don't know if you guys remember when we were much younger, because kidnappings were so popular in the 70s and 80s, they increased the sentence to life in prison. They wanted to deter people from kidnapping. So you're starting off with a charge that is similar or going to align with a charge as serious as murder because you could spend life in prison for kidnapping. So
You
these are
can?
serious charges.
Wow.
So that's relatively new.
No. It's for federal law. It's been a while. I am just saying that because kidnappings were so prevalent when we were young,
Yeah.
Yeah.
they
Oh.
increased the punishment to deter people. Because remember, the point of the law is to punish, but also to protect the public and to deter bad behavior.
Got
Mm.
it. I do
Okay.
remember that in the mid 80s, all those child abductions were
Yeah.
when they started the putting you on milk cartons and all of those
Mhm.
campaigns. So
Mhm.
I what I did not realize though is also during that time to deter people from it, they heightened up those sentences, which is good, which is good.
Yes. Which tells you that this is a serious charge. And of course you have your local law enforcement, but
Right.
a lot of times when you're dealing with the kidnapping, because they have more experience and more resources, the federal government will be invited in. Or if the case is there's proof of some kind of federal law that has been broken, they will show up to assist. Because in these kind of cases, you want a coordinated effort of
Right.
resources.
Got it.
So
So just
again, you hear
local.
about the FBI being involved in a lot of kidnapping cases, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because it's more resources, they have more experience, and they have more access to national databases.
Would it be safe to assume because when the FBI gets involved and it becomes like, is it because kidnapping can be you're transporting a person from one state to the other, so it can't just remain at a state level if they've taken them across a state line? So it wouldn't be state to state. Would it then become federal because you potentially move that person from one state, the state that the crime was committed in or the kidnapping was committed in, to and brought them somewhere else.
And so the answer is that yes, it would still be a state crime. It's not just a federal crime. So now it's two states involved. And the interstate trafficking or kidnapping across state lines would also involve the federal government. And
Okay,
generally, again, it's about pooling the resources and seeing who has the best case and the best evidence.
got it.
So everybody would still have their right to prosecute, but, generally, law enforcement is going to coordinate in finding the missing person, but also in prosecuting the case. Because again, they want to deter this kind of behavior. So they want to make sure that whoever has the best evidence is the person actually putting the case forward.
So then we're also looking at, because she's 84, it's elder abuse, neglect.
Mhm.
And because they wrote a ransom note and it's asking for money, is that extortion or attempted extortion? Can you break those down for us?
So the elder abuse sounds exactly what it is. Certain ages, depending on the state, is going to start somewhere around 60 to 70 years of age. She's 84, which means she's going to cross that threshold.
Got it.
And again, I want to point you back to the facts. It doesn't, we don't know what has happened,
Right.
Mm.
but I do want to make sure that everyone understands that abuse is not just physical. I understand that there has been some blood found, which leads to some kind of presumption that there may have been some physical abuse. But even if there is no physical abuse, simply the traumatic experience of being kidnapped or taken can also meet the threshold for elder abuse.
Wow. And because she doesn't have her medication, she doesn't have
Mhm.
access to her cell phone. They've disabled her her pacemaker. All of those things heighten.
Well,
Um,
we don't know if they disabled anything. I want to keep us on the facts. Like, so the facts, I know it was disabled, but we
But we
don't
don't know
know
who
that
did it.
we don't know who did it.
okay.
We don't know if it just lost connection, there's no Wi-Fi. Like, again, we do know that it hasn't been found. We do
Right.
know that her medication is still there. We do know she didn't show up for church. We do know that I think that this morning I actually saw some footage on CNN. It was on mute, but I saw like a masked man on her front porch.
Right.
Yeah, that's what they the police released that footage to the public, which to me is sort of like this. There's so many suspicions around, you know, who did it and the why,
Mhm.
Right.
right? The kidnappers, they're asking for $4 million in Bitcoin. They wanted that by the 5th of February. It increased to 6 million by this past Monday, which is interesting because Bitcoin as a value is not, the interest isn't as high as it used to be. So
Mm-hmm.
asking for Bitcoin is very interesting to me, which all of this just sounds very suspicious. Like,
Right.
who did it, why they did it, why are they asking for Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin non-traceable? Like, these are things that I'm like,
That would be my
what?
question. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, again, I don't know enough about Bitcoin to speak to whether it's
yeah.
traceable or not, but what I do know is that people say it's not traceable. I am going to say, as a person familiar with law enforcement in the 21st century, almost everything is traceable. So you leave a digital footprint somewhere. It is really about who can find it. If you're talking about a digital footprint, it's there.
It's there.
But I think that when you introduce to what Courtney was saying, you introduce Bitcoin or ransom or 4 million or 6 million, what you now have introduced is a new charge because now you have introduced intent with kidnapping, which does become a possible charge of extortion because you have, so extortion relies on intent and demand. I have asked for something,
Yeah.
I have demanded something in exchange for this criminal behavior that I have done. And then let's not forget our low hanging fruit that we talk about regularly on this show. Very simple definition: conspiracy.
Mm,
Two or more people get together and commit a crime. That's it. So that's not off the table. And Courtney, God bless you, God bless you, God bless you for putting out into the universe when she is returned home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If for some reason she is not returned home, we're talking about something else now. We are talking about homicide,
right.
felony murder. Let's say it wasn't premeditated. You can still be charged with murder in the commission of a felony.
Mm.
But if this was premeditated, it's not just felony murder, it's first degree murder.
Oh, wow.
And so we hope, we pray exactly what you said when she is brought home. But these are very, very serious charges on the table across the board. And one of them, many of them, all of them could land you in jail for the rest of your life.
Oh, wow.
Courtney,
It's funny.
who do you think has something to do with this? Your suspicions.
And because of the sensitive nature, I will say the first thing, having done, countless hours of research in scripted and unscripted true crime. Typically, it's somebody that the family knows. Now, I'm not making any real allegations. Like, I really am not, because I wouldn't want someone suspecting anybody that I knew and loved at a time where my 84-year-old mother is missing. But we've all seen when I've written for any crime show,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of hours in crime, there's extensive research that goes into it, and it has never felt that it's somebody you know. Somebody that you know, that's been in your home, somebody that you know knows that you have access to that kind of money, uh,
Hmm.
somebody that you know that that knows your mom. Like, it's somebody that you know. It's generally somebody that you know, or that is close to the family. You're not going to even initially start to ask for $4 million from somebody that you know that does not have that. That's not, what's
And
suspicious.
Courtney, I also want to say that you have to realize that it has to be someone that knows or who has taken the time to learn your schedule,
Schedule. Right.
who
That's the
knows
other
your
thing too.
comings
Yeah.
and goings, which would point to someone that is familiar with the mother and or the family, because you have to know someone's schedule to know when the right opportunity to take advantage of them.
And what we also know is this person knew she lived alone.
Mm.
Which is my other question too, because you talked about elderly abuse, how that is a crime, and that doesn't just mean physical only. Um, 84 years old living by herself. It's one of those things where you do think about that, like, wow, should an 84-year-old person,
By themselves.
be
Right.
living by themselves? And again, not based on they can't fend for themselves. I'm sure they can, but it is just something to really think about because you are in this state of someone attempting to do something to you because they know that you're at a disadvantage being 84 years old. The man that they showed, trying to like get through the door and all those things, that really just like broke my heart just to see that somebody who is that age has to succumb to that. But it does beg the question that if you are a parent, I'm sorry, if you are a child and your parents alive, you know, it's a smart thing to do, making sure that they have somebody to live with them.
Right. And those are all conversations that I'm sure we all have had with our parents or our remaining parents. When you become what I like to call the sandwich generation, where you have kids that are newly grown and you have parents that, like you said, even if they're, very, even if they're very active, if they're, they're still going, like there's a consciousness when you're stuck in the middle of care.
Hmm.
I sometimes have the same response to or thoughts that I have to my 21-year-old versus my mom, who is, who lives by herself, at in her 70s. So and then I'm always still conscious of me, being a woman who may live by themselves. Do you know what I'm saying? You never know who's watching you. You never
Hmm.
know. You just never know. And so I know that has to be heart-wrenching, for Savannah and her family. But one of the things that struck me as odd, and again, I'm not making any assumptions, but when I read it, she was dropped off by her son-in-law. Again, I'm not making any assumptions because whatsoever. It's too sensitive of a subject to make assumptions, but I can only imagine, um, what he might be feeling, making sure that she got home safely, uh, and then knowing that it kind of happened hours after. Um, I looked it up really quickly while Judge T was talking, and you were right, Tyranny. Bitcoin is the most traceable. So I'm curious as to know. When I looked it
That is
up, there were like,
wild.
yeah, Bitcoin ransom payments are the most traceable because all transactions are permanently recorded on a public, transparent blockchain ledger. While the wallet addresses are not directly linked to names, law enforcement and forensic tools can track funds in real time, mapping transfers to identify criminals, especially when they cash out via
Mhm.
exchanges that require identity verification. So why would you, I don't want to call anybody a name, but why
Dumb.
it's such an idiot to request millions of dollars that are the most traceable. You're better off trying to play like in the movies and dump a bag into a trash bin, bag of cash into a trash bin versus do everything digitally. The digital footprint.
I'm going to say that law enforcement may use that as a clue as well, because someone who is versed in Bitcoin or requesting Bitcoin, that's going to help them build a profile of
Mhm.
who the possible kidnapper could be. Because to your point, someone, that's in their 50s, 60s, or 70s who's not as digitally savvy, more than likely would ask for cash. You're
Right.
going to have your 20, 30-year olds asking for some kind of digital payment because that's all they're really familiar with. That's what they know. And so that may go into a part of the profile as a clue of who a possible suspect could be.
Got it.
And I will also say that, when we are talking about, if you look at this case, and I'm saying this really to the raindrops. If you look at this case, besides Miss Nancy, I'm Southern. I can't call her A Nancy. Miss Nancy, if
Mhm.
you look at her leaving or being taken, but if you look at everything else, her son in law dropped her off. They actually have security and ring cameras. The church members called looking for her, and they sent the police to find her the next morning. She has a phone connected to her pacemaker. She has so many things in place for her security. It sounds like Miss Nancy and her family did a lot to make sure that she was okay. And if she isn't okay, someone would be notified.
Oh,
Because
okay.
typically, Miss Nancy wasn't even missing for 24 hours. And they were on it, which time matters in these kinds of cases. If you take a typical 84-year-old, we may not know. I mean, I live in a building and I'm not making this up. We had a guy in here dead for weeks and we didn't know.
Wow.
Someone reported the smell. He died of natural causes, but
Mm.
I am saying he had no one checking on him. He didn't have what Miss Nancy has. And I
Right.
live in a building and
Yeah.
no one was looking for him. He
Mm.
was a recluse. He stayed in his place. So it was nothing out of character. So and I'm saying this to the raindrops because I want to be clear. Protect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because even when you do everything right, bad things happen to good people.
Right.
And
But
to,
we can work on prevention. We can work on mitigating risk. We can make sure that we have some kind of systems in place that if something happens similar to you that happened to Miss Nancy or to your mother or to your father or your child, there is something in place that puts you on notice sooner than later.
Question for you. That poses a really good question. How many, and we see these posts often, especially at the beginning of a new year. We're going to start seeing them now, around Valentine's Day. People become really super depressed. And aging alone or just being alone, living alone in America, that's a big thing. And
Mhm.
you always say, you'll read, check on your
Mhm.
friends.
Yeah.
And I'm just posing this question to you guys because you just made a really good point. It's not, we take for granted our devices connect us to folks.
Hmm.
Like if I see, oh, Carlos was in, LA, even though I hadn't talked to him, I'm like, hey, you're in LA. And then that's enough. Or you'll shoot a text to someone. Should we, no matter what age we are, how do we better check in on our folks? Like, how do we adopt healthier routines so that we know that, you're not just alone. Even if you're physically alone, you're not alone. Like, who checks on you? I can say my mom's in her 70s, but she will kill me because she watches if I gave her specific age, but she just looks fabulous. But
Yeah.
I do, I do, it bothers me that she lives alone.
My
Uh,
sister and I talk to our parents regularly, and I have shared this in the past, and I don't know how people will receive this. Um, Something could happen to my dad, and I wouldn't know because I would think he was just somewhere getting high. I have
mm,
Hmm.
prepared to not hear from him. I have prepared for something bad to happen to him. I have prepared to not know where he is and find him on the side of the road since I was a child.
Hmm.
So I don't know. It's a little bit different for me. I had to
Yeah.
find a peace with not knowing.
wow.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say everything is really based on the facts, based on your own family dynamic, based on what you have experienced, you know. And I would still be devastated
Right,
if my father was missing right now.
Yeah.
Like,
right,
and I didn't, if there was something that was introduced to show foul play, because he goes missing all of the time, and we just pray that he makes it back home. But if there was something that confirmed his DNA, blood, if
Yeah.
you know what I mean, it
Hmm.
had been some sense of foul play, even knowing that the lifestyle he's lived, and thinking that I have been preparing for it, thinking that I have been expecting the worst, embracing myself for the worst most of my life, I would still be devastated. Like, I couldn't even imagine what that woman is going through, which is why I also don't blame her for using everything in her power to find her mother.
Hmm.
And I commend her co-workers for showing up for her.
right.
Yeah.
Do you think, what are your guys' thoughts? Because you touched on this just a bit, Carlos, with paying a ransom. Do you think that you don't pay until you show proof of life? Do
Well,
you,
that's the one thing they were asking. They wanted, and I don't know the result of it,
right,
Courtney, in your research. Did you find it? But I saw the video, and I'm sorry, Savannah did say we're willing to pay at this point, but show us proof of life. Now, I don't know if they did, but she did ask for that, and she said we're willing to pay.
right,
I
Which,
would say that one, back to law enforcement. So you're going to want to go on the advice of the law enforcement who has evaluated the facts in the situation. And one thing that I will remind the raindrops of is that law enforcement is never going to put everything out into the public. They are not going to put facts out that would further jeopardize the safety of Miss Nancy. So there are things that are being held back that we do not know. So they may have actually confirmed proof of life, or they may have something that has said, if you're in a position to pay this ransom, I don't know about Bitcoin. I'm just talking hypothetically. If you pay it in Bitcoin, we can trace it. And because it's digital, we have a high chance of actually getting the money back. So we don't know what their actual strategy is of saving this
right.
woman's life. The other thing, I hate to keep bringing this up, time is not on her side.
hmm
In these kinds of cases, the more time that goes by, the more
Well,
difficult the reality you have to deal with of possible outcomes.
yeah, yeah. Because the thing that I've read too, because at some point, which is so sad, um, the kidnappers just want to like be done with it. And sometimes being done with it means something else. So yeah, that's the unfortunate part in all of this too. It really is.
And or because she is elderly and she does
It
not have
did.
her medication,
That too, yeah.
then you're dealing with the facts of now she's not getting the proper medical care, which could also jeopardize her safety
Right.
and health.
Yeah.
It's very sad. I mean, I feel like we usually have a lot more fun when we are doing
Mm-hmm.
these.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like the more we talk, like at different points, different stages, all of us become a little somber because I think
Yeah.
it's really hard. Like, one, we feel bad for her, of course, but I think it's really hard to have this discussion or even listen to something
Right.
like this and not think about your own mother, your own father, your own family. It's really hard not to project, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sad for her, but I'm really glad that we don't have to deal with that. But what would I do if I had to deal with that? Like, it really is a really tough situation
Yeah.
that hits all families or could, which is why I go back to no matter how much you prepare, you really have to remember that you got to be in charge of your own safety because bad things happen to good people every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. Courtney, any final thoughts?
I was just doing a little bit more reading. One of the things that I did want to kind of pivot to, and I'm super grateful that we're talking about this. I'm super grateful, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say, there has always been the kind of stigma of an unconscious bias when it comes to the disappearance of Black and Brown people receiving national coverage. Again, I'm not making this about race because I feel like if we do our part in spreading the word on stories that are mainstream media might extend the same courtesy to us when it's our stories, which is why I really am glad you wanted to do this, Carlos. But do we think our stories will start to garner the same kind of national attention, or do you think there is a disparity when it comes to the disappearance of even higher brow people of color?
Well, look, I think statistically has shown that yes, that's always been the case in terms of Black women, men, kids do not get the same coverage, so that's a fact. But I definitely agree with Just Tyranny, who said in the beginning that because Savannah obviously is a morning show anchor in America's household 5 days a week, all year round, that her coworkers and colleagues who work for the Today Show, they're obviously going to use their manpower of the machine to help out their sister whose mother is missing. And I think because of that, obviously it's national news because let's have a real conversation.
Yep.
On the flip side, if this was a woman named, Kelly, who lived in Idaho, we wouldn't be covering it. In all
Right.
fairness, you
In all
know,
fair.
in all fairness. So I think it's because of who, Savannah is to the public, which, and that's the reason why this story, to me, like you said too, Courtney, it's not a black or white story. It really is a story of human nature, preventative measures. Every time something of this magnitude happens, I think all of us looks at it like that could have been us. What do we do to prevent that from happening? So, is the reason why I wanted to talk about this topic because it is national news, number one. But number two, I think it's a story that is so relatable because we all have a parent or an elderly living a family member who is living by themselves. And what do you do in those situations? And how are you able to, prevent these things from happening?
And then not even just we keep talking about elderly, but just people living alone. I think there needs to be bigger conversations about aging and then aging and living alone. There are so many people out here, whether they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s plus, that live alone. And
Mhm.
there's not enough of us that check on them. It's really good to hear that you have the siblings and you check on your dad all the time. Tyranny, you told us your story, but even with our friends who
Mhm.
are, I think we need to create a little bit more awareness to really check on our friends. Have scheduled routines that if we don't hear from them, we're not just putting it off like, oh, well, they must be busy. Like,
Yeah.
who really checks?
Yeah, because I mean, I think it
Because
was
I can
amazing that her church was like, she didn't come to church.
Mm-hmm.
work today. That's
You know what I mean?
abnormal.
Like one of our friends, if we didn't show up in church, would be like, she probably overslept. They would not send the police to
Mm-hmm.
our house.
What's going on? Right. Right.
True
Yeah.
T.
Right. So,
Yeah, no, that's the thing. But that's why one thing that I would suggest to people who are watching the raindrops, if you are somebody who lives alone, I highly recommend that you have people you trust get your location,
mhm.
just in case something like Judge Tierney talked about somebody in her building was dead for weeks and no one noticed that. So like definitely send somebody your location who you trust. I highly recommend that. I highly recommend too that on your phones you have the option of having the emergency contact listed so that something happens to you. Let's say you get into a car accident, for example, the stranger or somebody can get your phone, tap on emergency contact, and contact that person and tell them so and so was in a car accident. So these are things that if you are living alone, you should definitely do. I highly
No,
recommend that.
But I will say
it's
to Courtney's earlier point, Carlos, I agree with all of those. I do think you need a non-digital touch point because digital, as we see in this case, does not work. Once it goes out, it
Right.
goes out. And I mean, I don't want to keep repeating it, but the fact that her church thought something was wrong because she was not in church is a physical touch point. This is a schedule. Miss Nancy goes
Hmm.
to church on Sunday, every Sunday, and if she's not here, something is wrong. So that same person that you trust to give your location, why don't you guys put something into place? One of the things that I do with my children is I have them send pictures of their location with no words, no anything. If I don't get a picture at a certain time, I'm checking in, I'm calling, then something is wrong. But also, I at least have a physical picture of your last known place.
Hmm.
So these are just things that we put into play that, and I've been doing this with them as long as they have had a phone, which wasn't until they were 16. Don't kill me. I know, blah, blah, blah. They're over it now. But come up with something that is also an actual, like every Sunday, I'm going to call my mommy. Every Sunday, best friend, we have to speak to each other. So if I miss that call, now you're checking my location. Now you're trying to find, like, you need something with the
okay.
actual physical touch place. Like, the digital is great, but we need some other touch points.
Yeah.
Poses another one. This poses another question. How do you guys feel about sharing pins to get into people's phones? Because that can open a whole nother.
No, I'm not doing that. No.
Of the things that I did with my daughter was before she could even get a phone, like we share each other's pin. And not for the purposes of snooping, but if I don't have access, you could share your location with me all the time. But if I don't have access to get into your phones, if I don't have access to you in a way, just from an emergency standpoint only, Carlos, if I check in on you and I come to your, who has keys to your house? Like who can,
Carlos was like, no, ma'am, and I'm
No.
sitting back on you. He's like, I'm pulling out. Like, no, not only am I not doing that, I'm pulling out of this conversation. He done sat back on you, girl.
Not happening.
so who gets to check
Don't
on
worry,
you?
I got things covered, baby. I have alternative ways.
I saw a meme on social media that says,
Yeah,
why do you have a password that everybody knows? I have a password, but I mean everybody knows
everybody.
my password. You know what I mean? Like it just don't even make sense. If you know me, you can get in my phone.
I'm sure your ex-boyfriends are watching this, Tierney.
They know my password.
You didn't change it after the breakup?
No. It's nothing in there that's that important that I'm hiding from you.
Not incriminating. Like if you
That's
go in,
hilarious.
yeah.
Well, look, I'm glad we definitely got a chance to laugh and be jovial towards the end. But like Courtney and Tierney said, it's a sad topic, and our thoughts and prayers go out to Savannah, her
Mhm.
entire family, and like Courtney said, too, when she comes home, we can't wait to celebrate.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, that's another episode, and we'll see you guys in a week and a half.
Yeah.
2 and 2.
All right, thanks, guys.
Bye.